So I'm going to do a couple of different things this morning. First of all, I do have a very small sermon. One of you last week said to me, just do a quick sermon and then you can show us a whole bunch of other good stuff. So the good stuff is actually my trip to Peru, so that's what Paul's in the process of bringing up, which also I do feel pulls in today's gospel reading. So let us begin with, may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and redeemer. Amen. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So I restate that because last night John and I had an opportunity to watch a movie called The Best of Enemies. Has anyone seen it? It was out last year. Well, good. So now I'm going to give you guys homework and tell you to go watch it when you get a chance. The reason why is it's based on the book The Best of Enemies, Race and Redemption in the New South by Osha Gray Davidson, which focuses on the rivalry between civil rights activist Ann Water and Ku Klux Klan leader CPLs. The movie begins by Ann and her daughter wanting better living conditions for themselves and their neighbors from their landlord. But when a fire breaks out in the daughter's school, it quickly becomes about how their children will be educated. The movie is based on true events of the summer in 1971 in Durham, North Carolina. At the beginning of the movie, John said to me, I'm glad I was too young to understand what racial discrimination was. I started thinking the same thing, as I was only 6 at that time. I know being from small rural communities like Blanchardville, Hollandale, and Mount Horeb, in the 70s and 80s, we were pretty isolated from racial discrimination. I went to school in Mount Horeb, and we did have one black family, and one of their daughters was a friend of mine as she was in my grade. But I never looked at her differently because she had darker skin than I did. As the movie goes on, there is a gentleman by the name of Bill Riddick who has had success in other states of bringing people together over injustice by holding a charrette. At first when they said it, I thought they were saying charades, and I knew that wasn't right because that didn't make sense, but it's pronounced charrette, which is several meetings held over the course of a couple of weeks in a group of people from the area that has two chair people and a Senate of 10 additional people, 5 from each side. It's designed to get both sides talking with each other. I don't want to spoil the movie for you, since it sounds like no one's seen it yet, because it is a very good movie. So I'm going to stop there and tell you about the story. But I want to bring it up because throughout the movie I saw references to our gospel lesson today. I saw the meek, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and the persecuted. I will tell you in the end, there is a change in many of those who sat on the Senate, and when it came to voting, there were some that could not vote the way they wanted to, and some who voted the way you would not expect. All 3 of the issues passed, including the issue of desegregation, which was a huge event. But what happens after and moving forward for CP and Ann, I believe, is just as important. They became lifelong friends and spoke about civil rights together. After the movie was over and I was getting ready for bed, I reread our gospel lesson for today because I wasn't done with my sermon. As I mentioned earlier, I had been asked by many of you to share my trip on Peru. And I wanted to weave that experience into today's lesson. But I was struggling a little bit. So I was not done with the sermon yet. I truly believe that things or events are put in our lives to teach us lessons, Remind us of what others have been through so we can continue to do what is right. Watching that movie last night reminded me of the pain, suffering, and hardship that so many people have and are enduring. And seeing the outcome, I'm reminded that God is there every step of the way. So now at this point, that was my short sermon, Beth. So now at this point, I do want to share my trip to Peru with you all, if you're all okay with that. And I want to give you a little bit of backstory on it. So many of you may know that back in June of last year, I was offered a voluntary separation from the company that I'd been with for 31 and a half years. And like many companies, they were doing some reorganization. So after a lot of thinking, discerning, talking to others, talking to John, praying, I made the decision to retire. A few days after that decision, I was scrolling through my emails, and all of a sudden, this email popped into my inbox called Celebration of New You in the Amazon. I opened the email, and it was from a tour company that I've used before, and it was 1 week in a remote Amazon jungle lodge, doing things like a walking trek through the Amazon jungle, to see the massive cedar trees, to see piranhas, fish for piranhas, a cleansing ceremony by a local shaman, and many other things, along with exercising every morning, which you're going to go, how does that fit in? Hold on. And a canopy walk. Who knows what a canopy walk is? Ooh, there's a few. Yes, and there's many of us that are afraid of heights that would never ever do it, right? So, the second week was a trip to Machu Picchu. And as I read this information, a feeling came over me that I was going to do this trip. It wasn't should I or could I, it was I was going to do it, but who would go with me? So I said to John, are you going with me? And once I told him what I was doing, he said, no, call my sister. So I called Bonnie, and she immediately said yes. And then the fun began. Understanding the shots we needed to have to go to Peru, talking to people that had been there to find out what we needed to pack for clothing, since we were going to be there for 2 weeks. Half time in the Amazon rainforest, the other half time in the mountains. We really didn't know what to expect. And then it was waiting for the trip to happen. All right, Paul, if you want to go to the next slide. And these slides, you might have to click once or twice. Okay, so this was our plane once we got from Miami to Lima, Lima to Iquitos. So Iquitos was the area that we were in first, and then you can click again. And these are tuk-tuks. That's all you saw in this city of Iquitos, besides our bus, was these little motorcycles that took you all over the place. And go again, and go one more time. And on the left side is our boat. I should have taken a better picture of the bigger boat that looked like it was this fancy boat we thought we were all going to get on, and then there was this little boat that was right next to it that we actually got on. And we were in the water. And then the picture on the right is one of the many trails that we had once we got to our lodge. So that boat took us 40 minutes down the Amazon River and to our lodge. And you can click again. And that's the outside of our building. And one more time. And that's another building that had the thatched roof. Now those are palm leaves that they replace every 3 years for their roofs. We didn't stay in those kind of buildings. We actually stayed in the one on the left that actually had a tin roof. So we didn't have to worry about bugs in the ceiling, just bugs under the floor or under the door. If you want to go to the next one, that was our room. So it was very nice and spacious. And then I think one more. And the top was our pool. We had a pool. This was a resort area. It was considered a 5-star camp. And the bottom is the building that had all the hammocks in it. That building was where we did our yoga, stretching, and meditation every morning. Because this trip was truly to be a well-being, health, and wellness trip. It was something different than this company's ever done before. They typically do tours where you go in and you do the crafts of the region, which we did do some of that, but they were really looking at wellness and how do you get yourself in a good place for the coming year. So you can go to the next slides. This, sorry. Some of them are built and some of them aren't. I don't know if you can go back to that one. This is just a few snapshots of the beautiful color that we saw in the rainforest and the different flowers and plants that we had. The next slide actually shows you our trees. So on the far right is that ceiba tree that I talked about. One of the days we took a trip through the jungle and walked to the ceiba tree. The ceiba tree, I don't remember if they told us how tall it was, but it's the oldest ceiba tree in the region, and so it is also protected, so it'll never be cut down. The one in the middle, if you can see, almost looks like there's tentacles coming out of the tree. That is a palm tree, and it's called a walking palm because the roots actually grow out of the ground. So there were quite a few of those all over. And the one on the left is the path, one of the paths that we took to the ceiba tree. So you can tell it's very primitive, and we had to watch where we were walking so we didn't trip over the roots of different trees or drop down too far when it was a little muddy and you didn't know that there was a hole there, things like that. So the next slides. One day we had an opportunity to go to an Indian village, and when we were there, this little boy on the left for Christmas had gotten a baby sloth. And this is a three-toed sloth. And three-toed sloths are not ones that people capture and kill and eat. There's no meat on them, unlike the two-toed. Two-toeds are actually protected because people do capture them and eat them. But this one was orphaned somehow, and so the parents got him for a Christmas present for this little boy. And he allowed each of us to hold him, and that baby sloth just wanted to be held. He was so cuddly. He was like a baby, like a true, like you were holding a baby. And his face was just so cute. And then the one on the right is a tapir, and he was the pet at the lodge. He was 8 months old. His name was Ari. And he came into our dining hall one day and kind of freaked us all out because he's kind of like a cross between a pig and a aardvark, I would say. But I believe they're of the rhinoceros family. And he was very tame, very friendly, and loved mango. So we fed him lots of mango. So you can go to the next slide, Paul. I might have to click one more time. So this was the Indian village called the Yagways, and we were fortunate enough to have them show us a couple of their dances and their clothing. And this was one of the Indian tribes that when the Spaniards came and invaded Peru, they thought that Peru was filled with women. And the reason why was because the men wore skirts like the women did. So everybody was in skirts. So they thought that's where that Amazon women of the Amazon came from. The Spaniards thought they were invading women. And it wasn't. It was definitely a mix. So this was just one of the dances that they had showed us. And then if you go to the next slide, and that's them getting us up to dance. And the next one. They also showed us that they still hunt with dart guns. So there's about 500 in this Indian village, and they stay as very traditional to their culture that they can. So when they hunt with dart guns. And so they showed us how to do it, and then we all got to try. And unfortunately, even though I've been a hunter, my dart did not go very far. I didn't have enough breath, I guess. Next slide, please. So on our way to our next day, so that was kind of one of the mornings. Each morning we would go out and we would visit a different part of the Amazon or have a different experience, and then in the afternoons we would have free time where we could read, we could use the pool. We had opportunities with our fitness instructor that was there with us to talk about what our health goals were for the 2020 year and beyond. And then we just had that afternoon and evening to stay right there on the camp, which was actually very nice because it was very relaxing. The next morning, on our way to our canopy walk, we had the opportunity to go to the village of Indiana, which is another Indian village, but it's actually a town. And there they had their market. And because there is not refrigeration, they have their markets every single day. So they're constantly having fresh fruit, fresh fish, fresh vegetables, eggs. So this is just a picture of some of what we saw when we were going through. Very colorful because of it all being fresh. Okay, go to the next slide. So as I mentioned to you in Iquitos, these are called tuk-tuks. And so while we were there in the Amazon, went by plane, bus, boat, tuk-tuk, boat, bus, plane. I think was all our transportations and our feet. So it's kind of like that, trains, planes, and automobiles. We did everything except for like animal riding, I guess. So this is one of those, and I think the next slide maybe has one with all of us in it. I'm not sure. I can't remember. You want to click to the next one? No. So once we got back in our boats after the tuk-tuk, we traveled to one of the other camps that actually has the canopy walk. And this was a really early morning trip. We were up and actually had breakfast at the other camp. And then we had to get back in a boat and go to the third camp, which is where the canopy walk was. And we walked about a half a mile in further to the rainforest. This picture is actually showing you all the different bridges that are part of the canopy walk. It's only like a quarter mile in total, and it does zigzag back and forth, but there were 13 bridges that we walked on this canopy walk, high above the ground. I'm very afraid of heights. So if you go to the next slide, this is what one of the bridges looked like. It was the width of a metal ladder, and then it had I guess, what is that, a 1x12, Rodney, that would fit in between the metal ladder rungs, piece of wood, and that's what we walked on, all around the tops of the trees. So we started out at about 30 feet off the ground, and if you go to the next slide, Paul, we got up to 118 feet above the ground, going up and up and up. And that was, yes, I kept saying, I'm only 10 feet off the ground because I could not fathom being 100 feet off the ground. But the view was beautiful, and this was Sunday morning. So this was my worship that Sunday morning on January 5th. When we got to the top, which was Bridge 6, or the Post 6, I stood there for a long time because it's like, I don't know how much further you could get to heaven than to be there. And it was a beautiful day. The flowers were beautiful, even up on the treetops. There were butterflies, the birds were singing, it was just beautiful. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is me being terrified, coming off of them. I think my knees shook for like 2 hours straight afterwards. I just could not get them to calm down. But I had to keep telling myself I'm only 10 feet off the ground because I don't think I could have done it if I wouldn't have. But so that's me on the right, and then on the left is just a picture of one of the bridges that are meandering through the trees. So it's quite an adventure. So the next slide. Yep. All right, so in the afternoon, we stayed at that camp, and in the afternoon, the gentleman on the left is actually the shaman that we spent some time with, and he showed us how they make paper from bark from trees, and they pounded it off of the tree trunk. It was amazing. So what he's holding there is actually a circle of the tree bark that they make paper out of. And where did I put it? We got an opportunity to paint on it, which is on the left-hand side. So this was my painting. And if you go one more clip, you kind of see our whole group with all of our different paintings. But the paint that we used was all natural. It either came from plants or from fruit. It was nothing that was man-made. It was all natural. So we got all sorts of different colors just from the nature, which I thought was really a cool thing. So next slide. Maybe. All right, then, one of the mornings we had an opportunity to go piranha fishing, and we were not successful. I think out of the 18 of us, one person caught 2 piranha. So we didn't get a chance to eat them or try them. But we fished with pole canes and string. That was what we had, and we were getting bites, but nothing got hooked. Then what you see in the middle and on the right side was our trip to Monkey Island. So Monkey Island is a refuge for orphaned or injured or endangered monkeys that they basically help them go back to the wild. And the gentleman that's got monkeys all over him, he is one of the volunteers. We had one of our gals, a monkey just gravitated to her on the right-hand side and would not let her go through the whole tour. He just crawled up on her, and that's where he stayed until it was time to leave. And she had a hard time leaving him, and he had a hard time getting off. For some reason, monkeys didn't like me. I'm okay with that. Taking pictures was just fine for me, but I did like the macaws, and so I have a picture of the macaw down in the lower corner. All right, now the next slide. Oh, so don't have to go back, Paul, but in the middle, I know I've told a few people, there was a picture of the Amazon River, and it looked really rough. There was some white caps, and that was the day that we were in these little John boats, and we had to come back across. And the water was running so fast that they actually had to bring another boat for us to actually go back across because they were afraid that we were going to capsize. And while we were waiting for that boat to come, we were sitting underneath a clump of trees and shrubs. And I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, but this is the rainy season that they're in right now. And so the Amazon was up by like 20 feet. The river was up 20 feet. And so it was rushing pretty fast, and a lot of the vegetation was being taken by the water. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear this creak, 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 smash. And I look over, and there is a tree that has fallen into the river. And our boat was sitting here, and that tree was literally here, and he went that way. If he would have gone this way, it would have cut our boat in half. And the tour guide and I were the only two that actually saw it because of the way where we were sitting. He immediately looked up, and there was a iguana, and he was a good-sized iguana in the tree. And he goes, "Oh, look, there's an iguana," because he didn't want anybody to get nervous. And I said to him, "Is that the guy who pushed that tree over?" And he just looked at me and just went like, "Don't say anything." So I would say I never ever felt unsafe the entire time I was in Peru at either site. That one made me a little nervous. And coming back across the river as rushing as it was, that was the only time that made me a little nervous. But I knew I was in good hands. So in the afternoon of that day, the gentleman in the middle is that shaman who showed us how they make paper out of the trees. He actually gave us a demonstration on all the different vegetation that they use for medicine. And so the one in the lower left corner is one that it's orange when you take the little seeds out, and they use that for skin insect repellent. And the one in the lower right, I don't remember what kind of vegetable that is. He was a funky looking vegetable, so I thought I'd take a picture of him. But they use everything and anything that they can to heal people with, and natural. Because where they're at, I think the closest hospital is like an hour and a half away. and you have to get on a plane to get there. So they really need their shaman in their villages to keep people healthy. All right, if you go to the next slide. Maybe. We did a night walk. Oh, sorry, Paul. Some of these are one click, some of them are two. I'm not showing the snake that was in our dining hall that shed its skin because some people are afraid of snakes. But on the left is a tarantula that we did see on a tree on a night walk. And he was very good sized, but he stayed there the whole time and didn't bother us. Tarantulas actually, just a side note, they're not dangerous to you, I found out. Their mouths are just tiny, so they can just bite like a mosquito bite, and so it's irritating, but they're not dangerous. So that made me feel a little better. The one in the upper corner is a huge bullfrog, which we heard a lot of those. The one in the lower corner is one of the beautiful flowers that we saw on the lily pad. And the one in the middle, I know it's not a very good picture, but there is a gazebo out in the middle of this pond, and that's actually where they did the cleansing ceremony. And that cleansing ceremony was done by the shaman, and he provided to whoever, whatever they needed that evening. It was a very emotional evening. I couldn't understand what he was saying because he was saying it in his native tongue, but it just, everybody got something different out of it, and it was a great opportunity to go through. All right, next slide. So the next morning was our last day in the Amazon. So Bonnie and I actually got up before the sunrise because we wanted to see the sunrise in the Amazon. And so if you click through just a little bit through the next couple of pictures, this is a gentleman that's in a canoe that's out in the middle. He is out early to fish so that he can take the fish to the village of Indiana and sell it. And as you see, the sun is rising. It took about 10 minutes for the sun to come up. I think there's one more with the sun up. But it was peaceful, and the water was like almost non-existent compared to the day before. So this was our last day. If you go to the next slide, Paul, we had an opportunity to do a little painting. As I mentioned, this was a tour that does craft tours. And so we had an opportunity to do a little painting. We started painting, and I'm not a good painter, so the lower one is mine. But halfway through our painting exercise, we had to trade with somebody. So I traded with an artist, a painting artist. She was an art teacher. Hers is the one in the upper corner, and I had to add something to hers. And I didn't know what to add, so I added the butterfly. I figured I was pretty safe. And then I got mine back, and she actually had mine as well, and so she added a few things, and I had to add a butterfly to mine too. So that was our little exercise for the afternoon. Next slide, we had the opportunity to do the sunrise that morning, and then we took a boat ride and we did a sunset that evening. So we got to see the sun come up and the sun go down that day, which was pretty spectacular. And I just took some different stages of the picture of the sun going down. I think there's one more big one. And that was our trip in the Amazon. And then we moved to Cusco. So in Cusco is the start of the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. It's a very safe city. It has, and the reason why is because 80% of their income comes from tourism. Their current population is 500,000 people, and I didn't feel that while we were walking around in that city. I mean, there's a lot of people, but it wasn't crowded. Cusco contains the Temple of the Sun, which is what you see here. And this is a complex that housed 6 temples in total. The Temple of the Sun being the largest, and this was, the Incas had created this. This was for the Inca religion. This was the most sacred site and the center of the Inca world. The Sun Temple was once covered in gold, thought to be the sweat of the sun. The Temple of the Moon, Kalia, was covered in silver, a metal that were thought to be tears of the moon. The other 3 temples were for the gods of thunder, rainbow, and the Creator. Unfortunately, when the Spaniards came in, They invaded Peru and specifically Cusco. They took all its gold and silver and melted it down for their purposes. And they actually converted the complex into a Christian monastery of Santo Domingo. And it is still that today. And they believe the Spaniards did that in the attempt to signify that a religion had been replaced by another. So one was replaced by the next. This, along with the palace of Inca Roca on, I'm not going to pronounce this right, it's Hutanrumyalki Street, are what remains of the impressive Inca buildings within the city. This street is one of the best preserved original Inca roads in Cusco. And if you go to the next slide, Paul. And the reason why is it is a pedestrian street only, and it's where you'll find the famous 12 angled stone and the wall that was once part of the palace of Inca Roca. And if you can tell the stone in the middle, it is perfectly 12 sides, 12 angles. But if you look closely, you see there's no brick and mortar. The stones are held together completely by themselves. And that's how all of the Inca buildings were created. So when they created them that way, they withstood earthquakes and storms and things like that. And when the Spaniards came in and built on top of these with brick and mortar, they didn't stay as well. So a lot of times they found a lot of these after earthquakes and after things were demolished, these kinds of rock walls were still standing. The ninth Inca ruler, Pachacuti, that's how you pronounce it, and his son Topa Inca were talented generals and over the 50 years created an empire that stretched from Quito to the Mali River, which is just south of Santiago, Chile. Cusco became the spiritual and political center of the entire Inca Empire. So if you go to the next slide, there's a couple more pictures that you can see the difference between the Inca walls and what the Spaniards had done, so I've just got a couple of pictures there. And then the next slide, I believe, takes us out of town. So above the city of Cusco at 12,142 feet is the Sacsayhuaman area. It was discovered that this hilltop region was originally built by the Quilcay culture in 1100, and then in 1300 the Inca expanded on what they found. The Spaniards invaded in 1532. So these are some of the ruins, and the Spaniards tried to move a lot of the ruins to the lower levels, but these are the rocks that could never be moved, and so that's why they're still there. You go to the next slide. At the top, there was a farm that had alpaca and llama, and so what you see here are, again, some of the many colors that we saw in this beautiful country. You see the wool hanging, and then what they've made out of it. In the lower left-hand or lower right-hand corner, here again are all the natural products that they use to create the colors that you see. Everything is natural. So the next slide should be, I might put that one in there twice, should be Blanca Cristo. And this statue of Jesus is 26 feet tall. I don't want to say reigns. It is seen from Cusco down below, and it's way high up on the mountain. It was a gift from the Arabic Palestinians who sought refuge after World War II. So it was very interesting that there was like all these churches, and then we had this, but it was from all these different types of things. The Spaniards, the Palestinians, it was just amazing what all was there. And then the next slide is a picture of Cusco from that statue. So it overlooks the valley. So from Cusco, we spent 2 days. If you go to the next slide, Paul, we spent 2 days traveling and, well, actually part of the day traveling to Aguas Calientes, which is the base of Machu Picchu. We went by bus and then we went by train And through that train ride, we saw all sorts of mountain ranges. The next slide. We are at top of Machu Picchu. So to get there, you have to take a train to Aguas Calientes, which is at the base of the mountain, and then from there you have to take a bus. And that's the only way to go up in, is to that, or to hike it, which my brother and Rodney want to do, so good luck with that. We did see lots of hikers, and there are a lot of people that do it. It takes 4 days to go from Cusco to Machu Picchu. But this was the very top that we climbed. I think that day we climbed like 300 sets of stairs. If you go to the next slide, you might have to click again. They call this area the Forest of the Clouds, and the reason why is because in a 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute hour, you can have clouds come in and go out, and everything's covered, and then everything is clear. So if you kind of flip through a couple of the slides here, you'll see just different parts of Machu Picchu. It's the guard shack. That's one of the famous pictures everybody takes because of the mountain in the back and the ruins down below. And there's actually 3 different worlds represented in Machu Picchu. It is the present world. Uca Pucha is the dead world, Ke Pucha is the present world, and Hana Pucha is the world from up there. And they felt that Machu Picchu was a city all on its own, and you can see if you skip through another couple more of the slides, you'll see some terraces. They farmed those terraces, and they were all contained. So when they lived there, they were self-sufficient. In 1911, Hiram, oh, I'm going to remember his name. Hiram, I have it, sorry. He was a professor from Yale. Hiram Bingham thought he discovered these ruins, and in actuality, he rediscovered them and had found some of the artifacts and took them back to Yale, and there's been a dispute between where those artifacts belong, and they actually are coming back to Peru, so they are in some ministries in museums in Peru. So if you skip, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more slides. So this was another view coming back down the mountain from the bus of the Machu Picchu, and you can see the workers working on the road, and the road was like a snake. It just kind of weaved back and forth. And there should be 1 more, I think. And I know I did talk really long, so I apologize for that. This last slide here is of the colorful market in Cusco on the last day we were there, and I just wanted to show you all the colors. I mean, for having natural colors, sometimes the senses and the smells and the colors were overwhelming, but it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. And I just want to close with the sights, the sounds, and smells were very big at the market. Thank you for letting me share my trip with you, and I hope if you have a desire or chance to see other parts of our world, wonderful world, you take the opportunity to do so. We will now do our hymn of the day.